Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of KSP Revival. This episode we're going to be finishing up the construction and launches that actually allow the Ultimatum to go interstellar with a crew. And we're also going to be exploring some of the new locations added in the Atlas system in Cosmic Serenity 3.0. The Atlas system is a trinary star system with 3 stars, those being Atlas A Major, Atlas A Minor, and Atlas B. The Atlas A system doesn't have anything to explore yet, but Atlas B has 4 planets, all of them presenting very unique challenges. Except for one, because it's just a hot Jupiter, you can't actually land on it. But getting there is going to be a little bit harder than other locations just because of how hot it actually is. Thankfully, the Ultimatum ISV is actually very resistant against heat. You may have noticed that I'm actually starting to upload bi-weekly. I did some digging around and it turns out uploading more videos more frequently gives you more views, which to be honest is just common sense. So I'm going to be trying to keep this upload schedule for as long as I possibly can. This first launch is going to be our vacuum lander, the HLV-3 Eclorca, named after the Hycean planet in the Harmonia star system, which I usually use to refuel my massive ISVs. Eclorca has some of the best locations for scooping out hydrogen. It just gives me the most out of the entire system. It's very similar to the Keyless heavy landing vehicle that I've used with the Nebulon, except this one's a bit more streamlined. I believe it has a bit more thrust also. I just feel like it also looks better. It also retains the low-positioned airlocks, so you can actually easily climb out without having a massive ladder on the outside. It's meant for use with high-gravity vacuum locations. Speaking of high gravity, this is a Singularity SSTO, which is made for use in high-gravity atmospheric environments. I could just probably use the Helium X, it's probably just as capable as this one, and smaller too, but I would go big or go home with this. So this is it, the Singularity SSTO, which is a much larger SSTO than the Helium X. It uses the Opt-J fuselage form factor, which is probably one of my favorites in the entire OPT spaceplane mod. It's kind of like the Mark II form factor, except it's a little bit bigger and slightly different in shape. I like how lifting body form factors look. Similar to the Helium X, it's powered by 2 air-breathing engines and 2 vacuum engines. These vacuum engines can actually work pretty well in an atmosphere, but I call them vacuum engines just because they're the only ones running in a vacuum. The air-breathing engines, which are also from OPT spaceplane, can run in a vacuum, but they're super inefficient. In fact, if I tried using them on the Helium X, they'd probably deplete the fuel tanks in 2 seconds. The vacuum engines are way more efficient, and they're also from the mod Impulse Party, which has a bunch of really high-spec rocket engines that are supposed to be fusion engines, but in actuality just needs a lot of electric charge, so they're more like plasma engines. There we go, docked safe and sound. However, I didn't actually launch this with much crew. I've only filled up the entire command pod, which is 6 Kerbals. If I really wanted to, I could fit 8 Kerbals in here, because the boarding ramp actually has room for 2 Kerbals. But most of the crew, I actually want to take up in the Helium crew vehicle. I'm actually going to leave to the Singularity SSTO docked to the Ultimatum when I'm done with the mission, and I'm just going to have the crew be returned with the Helium crew vehicle. Because I don't have to return 2 SSTOs then launch 2 more. I want to have that Singularity SSTO docked with the Ultimatum at all times. The Helium crew doesn't have as much TWR as the Helium X, so it has a little bit more of a tough time reaching orbit. Mostly because the engines are smaller than the Helium X, and you do need to get to a rather high speed to get the TWR you really need to start picking up speed. It also has a lot less fuel than other Helium models, just because a massive fuel tank is swapped out for a crew cabin. It still has enough Delta V to do taxi missions in low Sanctar orbit, and potentially beyond, because it does have a whole lot of Delta V with it. I'm not going to include any of the rendezvous fluff, I'm just going to cut straight to the final docking. For convenience sake, I'm going to leave the crew vehicle docked to the Ultimatum during this mission. Just so as soon as I arrive home, I can just undock it and send the crew home without having to do another launch. Yeah, this is the final launch. I actually wasn't planning on doing this, but I figured out that didn't have enough hydrazine for my manga propellant thrusters, so I had to send up a little tanker powered by this rather large rocket. I do want to make sure I have enough hydrazine to power all my RCS thrusters, because if I run out, that'd make docking a lot harder, so it's nice having a tanker like this. I originally planned to actually have the tank on board and have it completely fueled by the time I launched it off of the shipyard at the Creek Colony, but I just forgot to put one on there. Now at this point the Ultimatum's fully filled up, has all the vehicles attached to it, so now it's just time to go interstellar. Normally this engine has a very bad TWR, but I have a little doohickey on here that's kind of inertial dampener of some sort. It uses graviolium to boost the ISP and thrust of the engine. It's pretty overpowered. I actually buffed it a whole lot so it doesn't use as much graviolium. Because at this point in the game, it's a de facto sandbox, and I just have all the technologies. I'd be using warp drives for this trip, but for some reason the Blue Shift warp drives are super laggy on this save. I have no idea what's causing it. I'm yet to actually troubleshoot and figure this out. For the time being, I'll be using this somewhat cheeky method of boosting my ISP and thrust. If I got 100% throttle, I'd actually have a TWR of 50, so I have to limit my thrust to around 12 to match the gravity of Sanctar, so 1 G or 1 TWR. So this gravity ring isn't actually needed during these long voyages since the Kerbals can just use gravity normally with a thrust. The other thing I should mention is that because the engine is so efficient, having billions of delta V, I can actually just keep burning until I reach halfway and then just turn around and just to slow down. Even though I did buff the graviolium usage to reduce it a whole lot, this entire journey did use a good amount of graviolium. I could easily make a round trip, but just to be safe, I am going to refuel at the very first location, that being Icarus, which is a high Jupiter orbiting very, very close to Atlas B. Please excuse the visual glitches, I have no idea how to fix that. Just seems to be a glitch with interstellar travel. Graviolium can be harvested from the exospheres of gas giants. Usually Icarus doesn't actually give you graviolium, but I configured it so that it does. Has the same configs as Joule, I believe. It's not cheating, I just think that it's not properly configured to actually support graviolium and Blue Shift, so I just added the configs myself. They're the same configs as Joule, I believe, so they're not too overpowered or anything. It'll still take a decent amount of time to actually scoop the necessary graviolium. After a pretty short voyage of only a couple hundred days, it's finally time to explore the Atlas B system. I'm not gonna land on Icarus because it's a gas giant. I'm only gonna use it to refuel. I don't actually have to refuel hydrogen because I used barely any of it during our transfer burn, but graviolium, I do want to keep the fuel tanks for that rather full. The stock maneuver tool isn't really good for plotting out interstellar burns or prolonged burns that send you on a direct trajectory towards another planet. You may notice that Icarus is so close to Atlas B that it's actually actively being burned off. This planet might actually not exist in a few million years just because it gets vaporized. However, the trail might actually be a really great place to collect resources. Another great thing about the Ultimatum is that if I ever need more thrust because I've waited too long to start a burn, I can just increase the thrust limiter. It may not be the most comfortable thing for the Kerbals, but it will significantly increase my TWR. I can only go up to around 85 thrust limiter though, because this vessel is only really designed to go around lower than 100% throttle. If I tried going above 85, the engine would overheat and stop working. I don't ever actually have to go beyond 80% though, So it won't be really an issue. Unless I do run out of graviolium, then that would be really bad. I don't actually have to end up in a perfect circular orbit. As long as there's a low orbit, that'll be perfect for scooping. This trajectory will put me in a rather inclined orbit around Icarus, but it turns to be a great thing because if I'm on an inclined orbit, it'll give me perfect opportunities to showcase the volumetric aurorae that are on most planets nowadays. In fact, all the bodies in Cosmic Serenity now have volumetric aurorae. So now, instead of being just 2D images like the clouds were, they're volumetric, just like it is with the volumetric clouds. Speaking of volumetric, this entire beam of materials being blasted off of Icarus is looking very sweet, especially with all the little projectiles you see flying away from it. Icarus kind of reminds me of a comet because it's being blasted off by the sun, except it's a much bigger one. Not even a comet, it's a gas giant, hot Jupiter. Similar to how Foley from the Hades system has a comet trail. In fact, I don't actually think it's called Foley anymore. A whole lot of the locations in the Hades system got renamed so they actually have a consistent naming scheme. Some of them are the same, like the ice giant Kalis remains named Kalis. So I don't actually have to rename all my landers I dig for Nebulon. This is a rather wacky orbit, but it'll give us some of the best views of the planet. Man, these volumetric clouds and volumetric aurora are looking amazing. It's great to see how far KSP planet modding has come from when Copernicus first came out. Speaking of modding, I actually created a Discord server meant for YouTubers and modders only. It's to allow for communication and encourage collaboration. I made it to allow YouTubers to easily collaborate with each other, and to allow modders to, especially niche modders, to have their mods be featured by YouTubers more. I'll leave a join link in the description. If modding or YouTubing isn't your thing, you can still join my community Discord server where you can talk about Kerbal, playing Kerbal Space Program. I also have craft files and other gameplay sneak peeks on there. So if you want to see sneak peeks of my future KSS2/Promised Worlds YouTube series, I suggest you join my Discord server. I have a bunch of screenshots that I upload all the time. Now it's time to visit our next planet in the Atlas B system, this being Erebus. Now Erebus is a very special planet. It has 1.1 Gs of gravity, so similar to Kerbal or Sanctar depending on which timeline you're in. But it has 95 atmospheres of pressure. So it's somewhat similar to Venus, that being similar mass, gravity as Earth, but very, very thick atmosphere. The very mention of 95 atmospheres probably instills fear in every Kerbal Space Program player's mind. However, I have a few tools in my tool belt that'll actually help me land here. Those being just a bunch of mods that may or may not be borderline cheating. I mean, in the stock game, you could probably easily land here by using propellers just to get to a very high altitude, and then actually use conventional rocketry. To be honest, I feel like landing on places like Eve might actually be easier than a whole lot of people say they are, because all you need is just a whole lot of TWR, or a way to get unlimited delta V in an atmosphere. Like, even the stock propellers that use only electricity, or all those added by the DLC, I forget if they're added by the DLC or not, but the propellers in the stock Kerbal Space Program game are actually really good for landing on Eve or other high atmosphere locations, because they can work in just about any atmosphere as long as it's thick enough, and they can carry you to where normal rockets will actually start to work again. Actually, on second thought, propellers might not work, because at the insane pressures that Erebus presents, the stock physics engine just has a complete breakdown and doesn't process drag and lift correctly. So if you use physics warp, or go too fast and put too much aerodynamic stress on your vehicle, your craft will disintegrate and go out of the star system at the speed of light. Probably much faster than the speed of light. But you're gonna summon the Kraken if you go too fast, or use physics warp, basically. This is called foreshadowing, by the way. I was a little worried that the Singularity wouldn't be able to perform this mission, but it actually crushes it. Though I did have to load a few quick saves due to numerous issues that presented themselves later down the line. Being a Venetian planet, Erebus is covered in a thick layer of clouds. I wonder what lies below. We're about to find out, actually. Deploying air brakes during descent here is a little risky because they always start to overheat as soon as you deploy them. I was hoping to do a rather straightforward and stable descent, but I was getting too hot, the air brakes wouldn't work without melting off. So eventually I decided to go ahead and go for a tumble. Tumbling makes you lose control, but it's a great way to actually bleed off speed. Usually I tumble just because my spaceplanes are very poorly designed, but the Singularity is actually very stable, can easily recover from tumbles. Similar to the Helion. The Helion series of spaceplanes are very stable. Eventually we can actually descend and slow down enough to stop the plasma from forming. Now it's time to descend into the dark abyss that is Erebus. To pierce the dark cloud layer, you can barely see anything, it's almost all darkness. Thankfully, below the cloud layers, it's a lot brighter somehow. I wonder how the light isn't visible here, but is visible down there. Not very realistic, is it? Even when pointing downward a whole lot, it's still very hard to descend just because of the amount of drag you're facing. And remember when I was talking about foreshadowing? Well, I just destroyed my craft. It was obliterated by the Kraken. Not once, not twice, not thrice either. But 4 entire times I went too fast or accidentally put on a physics warp. And completely obliterated my space plane. This time I went too fast. Good way to notice when your craft is about to be obliterated by the atmospheric Kraken is when it starts rolling to the left and right, like jiggering between roll attitudes very quickly. Eventually I managed to get the landing right, though I had to load a quick save a few times. I don't even have to brake that hard because the atmosphere is so thick. Just pitching up to put the landing gear down actually slowed me down enough to come to a complete stop. Erebus has a very odd geological profile. There's lots of massive structures of rock jutting out from the surface. And the sky looks very weird. Most of it's black. You can also see some purple, like as the sun sets. One great thing I love about the Singularity SSTO is that it has this really convenient boarding ramp. So instead of having to get a massive ladder and climb out, I can just walk right out. This is really great for high gravity environments. I only brought 3 Kerbals down here because I really didn't want to bring too many Kerbals to Erebus because my Hecaton says it's risky, we don't want many Kerbals down here. For once, the Kerbals actually have a very good reason to get out of here as soon as they land. Erebus is very dangerous. I'm not sure how hot it is, but if it's anything like Venus, it's probably enough to melt the entire space plane. But apparently it's not because I don't see any heat bars on here. The atmosphere is very hazardous though. Completely just ignore the fact that he just walks right through the airlock without a care in the world. Of course I have to run all the science experiments. I did forcibly complete the tech tree when I started this series. But to be honest, I still want to collect as many science experiments as possible. Now it's time to begin the arduous descent journey. Now I can't go too fast or I'll get obliterated by the Kraken again. So slow and steady it is. There's no point in trying to maintain a rather shallow trajectory. You should just go straight up. It's the fastest way to get out of the thick parts of the atmosphere. Besides, these air-breathing engines can run extremely well in thick atmospheres. They're practically made to handle this. In fact, I believe this spaceplane would be impossible but if I didn't have any spaceplane engines like this. Sometimes the entire spacecraft kind of tips over a little bit too much, so I have to manually adjust the yaw. Great thing about the barometer and thermometer experiments is that I can actually toggle the display on them and see the temperature and the atmospheric pressure. So I was actually looking at the display for the pressure to actually see when it was safe to start turning around. At this point I decided it was time to actually start climbing. The vacuum engines work really well in the atmosphere, but probably not one that's so thick, so that's why I waited until I ignited them. Also, I didn't want too much thrust or I would have gotten torn apart again. I do have to pitch down momentarily just to collect enough speed to actually get the air-breathing engines to start working properly. Also, with a bit of help from the VTOL engines, I can pitch up. Having VTOL engines on an SST is actually very convenient, not just for easily landing it, it's also great to help you getting extra kick during ascent. Though they're not best to keep on all the time, because they may actually end up slowing you down when they put more drag on you. So it's not always good to have them on all the way. It's just they're there just to give you a bit of extra kick and to help you land. Making VTOL engines with OBC spaceplating is actually very easy because there are a whole lot of VTOL engines that work very well in any atmosphere. The ones I'm using are just electric fans that are very easy to put on. There are some ones added by Near Future Propulsion, Near Future Spacecraft, I believe, that use intake air and liquid fuel. So they only work in oxygen-rejected atmospheres, but I believe Near Future Spacecraft also adds a bunch of fans to it. Ones that work in both oxygen-rejected atmospheres with liquid fuel and non-oxygen atmospheres with electric charge. But they're not as streamlined as these other engines I'm using. Now 2 down, 2 to go. The Atlas B system still has a couple of planets I'll have to explore, but that'll all have to wait until a future episode. Hope you guys enjoy watching this, and I'll see you all later.